Hello! Today, I want to talk about a video, and I got a comment from a nice gentleman on my YouTube video a while ago. He was like, hey man, can we have a little bit of original content? Every beep video is a reaction, which is the lowest of the low of kind of content. I was like, ouch. And I was like, okay, gentle user, what do you want to see? He was like, all right. And he went through this long list of stuff. So the first thing that stood out to me was he said, I want the best, worst features, mechanics of Final Fantasy XIV. So that's what we're going to talk about today, class. The best, worst things about Final Fantasy XIV. And I'm going to start with the best because that's the easiest thing to talk about because everybody loves Final Fantasy. The first thing I want to talk about is community. We've got a great reputation for having a very welcoming community. A lot of WoW players, especially latest WoW refugee wave, they've talked about how they've gone into dungeons and how patient people were, how they didn't just leave, how when people screwed up or when they go AFK, people are still there. They're still there to help you. The old Sprout icon, when people see a Sprout icon and you ask a questions, you know, the Final Fantasy community stumbles over themselves to give you a very detailed explanation as to what's going on. And I think it's true. There's a lot of truth to that. Now, obviously, I know some of you out there thinking, come on, boy, I did a dungeon the other night and there was this idiot. Yeah, there's idiots in every game. That's true. But overall, Final Fantasy's one of its best features is that it has a very, very welcoming community. And you can't really deny that. There are exceptions. There's bad apples, but you really can't say that that's not true. It is. It's a great community. It's a vibrant community, very active community, very helpful community. There's discourse, there's videos, there's guides. There's people dedicated to giving you the information, and there's a lack of that competitive vitriol and toxicity we see in some other games. And there's a whole reason behind that. That could be a whole video in itself. There's exceptions to the rule, but overall, it's a great community. Now, the next thing I want to talk about are the developers. The developers are a big reason why and I know a lot of other people, are heavily invested in Final Fantasy XIV. You'd be surprised what kind of things you would put up with if you really, really like the developers. This development team not only has shown us that they care about the game, but they have brought us to tears in certain situations. Like most recently when Soken basically dropped a bomb that he was dealing with cancer while working on the game from a hospital room. The developers there at FanFest really didn't even know it at the time. And it was a tear-jerking moment for all of us, players, developers. Yoshi P had to turn around. He was like, the people were breaking down crying. I mean, come on. These are lovable people. They have lovable personalities. You feel like you've known them for years because I think they're somewhat genuine in everything they say. It's easy to believe them. Even when they mess up, they'll fess up. So when somebody does that, it's easy to trust them. They're very, 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 very good on patches, updates. Even during COVID, we had a steady schedule of patches and updates. Even though a lot of the things got delayed, they were on top of it. They are active in nerfs and buffs, even though, you know, the PvP community may disagree with me a little bit. Say, hey, they don't even know PvP exists. And I agree to a certain degree that PvP could use some love. But overall, they do address some issues with PvP. It's not completely ignored, but it is a lower priority. I will agree with that. And they buff things where needed as well. So right now the game is in a state to where there's not a whole lot to really complain about from a developer perspective. It's like, yeah, the game has issues and problems, but we don't really have to complain that the developers don't listen because in general, we think we get a lot of feedback from developers, and it's kind of weird because they're Japanese. You would think that there would be some kind of language barrier or some sort of a wall or something against, you know, North American and other regions feedback. But these guys, they listen to everybody equally. And in some cases, they may even listen to us a little bit more in the North American regions, but I get that sense that they do. These developers care about things like old content being relevant. It's a big problem in a lot of other MMOs out there. That other game. They make conscious design decisions to keep old content relevant so that we have these opportunities, and the point I talked about before with the community, to help Sprouts through dungeons, to help Sprouts through raids, and help people through older content. And we get incentivized for it. We get really, really good rewards for things that are relevant to us, even if we're max level. So there's not only a community bonding aspect to it, there's also a time incentive that you invest your time, and you're going to get some kind of tombstones, you're going to get some kind of guild, you're going to get some kind of experience, you're going to get accommodation. Accommodations are good too, to help you along your way. So they keep old content relevant. And also they play the game. You may have heard Yoshi P is a purple parser. Using that tool, that means that he's very good at the game, and he plays Black Mage, which is arguably one of the more difficult games to do high level content in. If the director of the game is really good at the game, then that says a lot about, you know, decisions that come down, that he knows what's going on. Both at a high level and from a casual player's perspective, because these developers, they understand that. Like, here's an example. When they had to implement an AFK timer because we had a lot of influx of players from World of Warcraft, and servers were full and we were getting a lot more queues. They had to implement an AFK timer, like a kick timer of like 30 minutes. Yoshi P wrote up this big post about how they know that Limsa is important. When you talk about Limsa, I'm talking about people that idle in Limsa and dance and RP. And other places that they just sit there and dance and do crazy stuff and talk and emote. He said he realizes that is an important part of the game. I don't know how many other directors or developers or any type of people in charge have actually acknowledged that part of the community as being important. I can't think of many other games that have done that. It probably has happened, but that just goes to show he knows what's going on in this game. He knows that a lot of people do that kind of stuff, and he promised to, you know, make some changes to make those people accommodate what they need to do while maintaining the AFK timer and everything. So these developers, man, they listen, they understand the game, and it makes for a good experience, even though there's problems. The next thing I want to talk about is the game trial. Have you heard of the critically acclaimed MMORPG named Final Fantasy XIV, which includes the award-winning expansion Heavensward? You can play this game for 60 days. No, you can play. I messed it up. I should start the whole thing over. You can play this game up to level 60 with no limitations. Download today. You may have heard some variation of that message. It's a meme in the community. People talk about it all the time. This is arguably the best game demo trial that has ever been created. We talked about it in my chat. It's probably over 150, 200 hours of content for free. No obligation, nothing needed. You just simply go sign up, download the game, and you're playing basically the full game up to level 60. And there have been players out there, they've been confirmed that they have leveled every single job that they have access to level 60. And you know how many hours that takes? Quite a bit. And they haven't spent a dime. I think the gentleman went on record to say, I'm close to buying the game. I'm thinking about buying it. He says, when I run out of things to do, this is what he said, when I run out of things to do, then I'll think about buying the game. That is truly amazing. Absolutely amazing. So arguably the best game demo trial ever created. There's no real reason why you shouldn't try it. I think a lot of WoW players out there are still on the trial. They've probably been playing for hundreds of hours and they still haven't gone through the trial. I think when Asmon Gold and people were getting, you know, they were like getting close to finishing Heavensward, people were like, still on trial, still on the trial. We're still on the trial period. This is still trial content. And there's so much that they've done. So much. The next thing is the time. Your time is respected. And this is a very common argument for World of Warcraft players, how the World of Warcraft developers don't respect your time. Well, it's the opposite in this game. Your time is respected. Yoshi P has gone on record many times. When I say Yoshi P, I'm talking about Yoshida, the game director. He's gone on record many times to say that they want you to take breaks from the game. They don't want you to have to play the game every day to be, you know, caught up on relevant content. They want you to log in, do the current content, and when you're done, take a break from the game and come back when there's more content. That statement alone shows that they respect your time. They don't want to keep you chained to the game to do dailies, to do all these things to progress. If you just log in, do what you need to do, you know, play for a few weeks and then go play something else, the game's designer, director, the developers are cool with that. And it shows in the game. It shows in how the game is played. It shows in your rewards. It shows in how much grind is implemented in the game. You're not going to lose much if you don't do it. Like a great example are the relics, the relic weapons. Sure, You can grind your relic weapons and have best in slot for a few months, but you still won't be able to, if you don't do it, you won't be that far behind. It's something that a lot of players do mainly just for glam, you know, because you're going to be best in slot until Endwalker comes out in a couple months. So what? Even if you do arguably one of the biggest grinds in the game, you're still not going to be ahead in terms of a lot of different categories from other people. It's really a cool thing to be a part of. Like that makes me want to grind more artifacts. I've grinded, I think, 7 of the artifacts, and I'm trying to get them all, mainly because I enjoy the content. It's a weird grind that I actually like, this artifact grind. Some people look at me crazy when I say that, but it's true. I actually enjoy the relic grind. I feel like the developers respect my time. I can feel like I can not play Final Fantasy XIV for a few months and not feel behind in terms of like progression. Sure, I'll get behind in like contents, maybe new systems will be added and I won't know what's going on. I won't feel like I'm left behind in terms of progression. Even if I buy like the best crafted gear in the game that you can get right now and just use that until Endwalker comes out, I won't feel like I'm behind because the game respects my time. And that's something that can't be said for a lot of other games out there. And it's one of the best things about the game. The next thing I want to talk about is the story. I bet you guys are out there like, he hasn't talked about the story yet. The Final Fantasy XIV story. That's all I hear about is the Final Fantasy XIV story. Have you played Shadowbringer? Story. Yes. The Final Fantasy story, Final Fantasy XIV story is relevant. And that in itself says a lot about this MMORPG. There are not a lot of RPGs out there that players can say that the story is not only really, really good, but relevant to the game. People look forward to not only the new content coming in expansions, but what's going to happen next in the story. Just like a sequel to a movie. I think one of the topics people talk about all the time when they bring up Final Fantasy XIV, and it's kind of controversial, is that it's arguably one of the best Final Fantasy stories in the entire series, which is saying a lot. You got to contend with 6, you got to contend with 7, you got to contend with, you know, all of them. All the Final Fantasy titles, 10, 11, 12, all of them. And you say that this is arguably one of the best stories in all of them, and it's an MMORPG, and the answer is yes, it's that good. The story is that good. Now, I have gone on record in a lot of my videos to say that that's not the only thing the game has. I feel like Final Fantasy XIV is a lot more than the story, but I do believe that the story is relevant, very, very relevant to the game. And, you know, I disagree with a lot of some of the content creators out there. Like even Jesse Cox said that everything about the game is based on the story. You know, it's like everything is designed around the story. And that is something I have gone on record to disagree with. I don't think everything is designed around the story. I think the story is very important. I think the story is relevant. But I think there's a huge MMORPG out there that's independent of being tied to this story that you can play without having any idea what's going on with the story and have a great time. But that doesn't take away from the story. I think the story is very relevant. There's a lot of crossover content in the story. You'll see a lot of events and a lot of things with games like other Final Fantasies, like the 24-man raids, all these games that they reference. These are older Final Fantasy games. And even most recently with Nier Automata, with the Shadowbringers raids here. Yokai Watch events, Dragon Quest stuff, Monster Hunter, you know, the Final Fantasy XIII crossover with Lightning. Just a lot of throwbacks, if you will, to older Final Fantasy titles. And the music, good grief. The music is brought over with those games, like we saw with Nier Automata, you know, when you do like the Fates with the Final Fantasy XV crossover, which is coming over, you'll hear music from those games. So they're taking advantage of a lot of Square's properties, even with tie-over content with Capcom, with Monster Hunter. I mean, you get a nice mount, a really, really nice mount from Monster Hunter. That's arguably one of the best ones in terms of like flying mounts. You know, people look at that mount, they go, wow, that's really, really nice. And they grind that content just for that mount. So these are just story crossovers. And then there's side quests. We can't talk about side quests unless you talk about Hildebrand. And I say it all the time. This is the best side quest I've ever done in any quest, in any game. Hildebrand is the best side quest I've ever done. It's so goofy. It is so wacky. It is so out there. It's very anime. Probably we talk about, I talk about how I don't think Final Fantasy is that anime. Oh, Hildebrand, that's anime. That's some anime-ish stuff right there. And it is hilarious. It's some really goofy writing, some really over-the-top stuff that you are not allowed to take serious. And we look forward to it every time they come out with a new patch with some Hildebrand content. If you haven't done Hildebrand yet, make plans. Go and do it. It is really, really nice. The story is relevant. The story is amazing. You get tied to characters. You get great character development. You get throwbacks. You get all this great lore, and it's all relevant to the game. The next thing I want to talk about is job class freedom. Job/class. I say job/class because the term job is a Final Fantasy thing. Other games use like role and class and spec, but we call them jobs here in Final Fantasy. So if you don't know, Final Fantasy XIV allows you to play one character that does everything. They can be any job, they can be any gatherer, they can be any crafter. They can do everything that the game has to offer with one character. Yeah, that's how the game's designed. It's not a common thing. It's not a common thing. This gives you a lot of freedom to try many different things without having to worry about rolling alts and worrying about a lot of things that comes with rolling alts and multiple levels of progression and parallel progression. No, everything you're doing on that one character is relevant because you can always go back and forth and not lose that progression that you were working on before. You've got freedom. You've got true freedom. Your character can be anything you want. And this is something that you don't generally see in these theme park like MMOs. This is kind of like something you see in sandboxy stuff where you have options to do everything on one character. And this is kind of a unique thing for a kind of a theme park MMOs that your character can do everything. And it gives you a lot of choice. It gives you a lot of replay value. It gives you a lot of variety. It takes longer to get tired of the game. And that trial I talked about earlier, you can play all the classes that are available pre-level 60. There are some classes that you can't play because they require later expansions. It's a lot of classes that are available to you up to Heavensward, and you can play all of them. It's crazy. And the byproduct of that is that there's no real, and this kind of goes back to the developer talk I talked about before, that doesn't trap you into all these metas that you see in other games. Pretty much every class is viable in a majority of the content in the game. Sure, at the highest tier of echelons of the game, they're gonna say, okay, warrior's the best tank, and paladin, blah blah blah. This is the worst tank for this, and you probably want to progress with a red mage because res mage, and blah 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 blah. You don't want to prog with a black mage, blah blah. People got all these theories, but that's for like savage and higher stuff. For a majority of the content in the game, you can play anything you want and be just fine. You're not gonna be at a disadvantage. Even at the highest level, you can play with those classes. Some people are like, oh, it's more efficient to, the min-maxers are going to care. But in general, the game doesn't punish you for playing whatever you want to play. I mean, unless you go in as a level 1 weaver. They don't let you do that, by the way. It's really nice to be able to enjoy a game like this, and every job is viable. You don't have to worry about, if you like nuking things as a black mage, you don't have to worry about saying, why did you bring a black mage? We don't need a black mage. Nah, you can do everything with everybody, and the game doesn't punish you for that. So job class freedom not only gives you access to all of these jobs and all these classes and all these capabilities on one character, but it doesn't punish you for sticking with something that you actually want to play. Speaking of job class freedom, let's talk about crafting. Whoo boy, crafting in this game is so good. It is, I always say it could be its own thing. It's like you can just craft in this game and it feels like you're almost playing a different game because it's just so much there. Like there aren't a lot of crafting systems out there like it. I mean, I think there's better systems out there. I think other games have done it better. And I actually preferred, like 1.0 got a lot of flack for having bad crafting, mainly due to lag and the different screens. But I thought the systems were intact. I thought they were actually pretty good. I actually enjoyed the crafting in 1.0, save all the lag and all the crazy screens you have to go through. The crafting in this game is crazy. If you don't know, crafting professions are their own job. So you have to actually equip a weapon, whether it be a pot or a hammer, or you can equip a weapon and you have different gear, you have different abilities, you have different rotations, you have different quests, and it's its own world. And it's amazing. It's not a side thing. It really isn't. You could treat your crafting class as a main. Like, what do you main? Culinarian. Oh, so I can go over to you and get some smoked chicken for my white mage, or I can go over to you and get some food for whatever job I want. Yeah, I'll hook you up. I don't know. It's a really nice feeling to have something so rewarding like crafting, because I like crafting in MMOs more than just about anything else. But it's so rewarding because it not only makes you money, especially in housing and coffee biscuits. It not only makes you needed, especially with in-game and with Savage Rating and new tiers coming out with new crafted gear that's going to be very popular, and new crafted foods and new crafted ingredients and new crafted materials. You're going to be very, very much in demand, but you get the satisfaction of knowing that you're not going to be, you know, just put off to the side because you're a crafter, because the game takes it so seriously. They treat crafters like it's its own thing. It's like an almost entirely new game. And I think when people first get into it, like if you go to the different websites and the tools that are available, it looks very intimidating because the rotations are just as involved as the DPS classes and the magic classes. You know, the healing classes, all the disciples of the hand and the land are just as involved as the disciples of, you know, war and disciples of magic in this game. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. Sure, you're gonna get to a point to where you can macro most things, you know, for, you know, different types of durability items and stuff. You're gonna have different macros for different situations, but you still got to work on rotations to get to that point. Even the disciples of war and magic, you know, you're gonna have set rotations after a while, which, you know, macros are not really a thing to do in those, but some people do macro some things. Crafting is so good. So very good in this video game. Highly encourage you to check it out. And the last thing I want to talk about, which I know some of you are surprised as the people who are thinking about the story, is the music. True story time. Gather around, children. I had taken a break from Final Fantasy around the time Heavensward came out. I took a long break from it, and I was watching one of my fellow creators play, and he was doing Castrum Meridian, and he got to the final boss. I heard the music play. Dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. I was like, wait a minute, I know that song. And I started bouncing uncontrollably. I'm like, wait a minute. Dun, 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 dun. I was like, oh my gosh. And I started getting the tingles. I was like, man, happy memories rushing through my brain. And then I resub. I went and resub right after that, because the music had a connection with me, so much so that I wanted to go back and play the whole game based on the music. That's the kind of music that's in this game. It provides an elevated experience above what the game has, because the composer, we call him Soken, the mad genius, has some kind of an unnatural talent to create this amazing music in an MMORPG. People come to streams all the time. They're like, is this the in-game music? What is this? Are you on Spotify? Nah, dude. Nah. This is the 20. You know, and then when you do Alexander, people think you're at a rave. They think you're at a rave. It's like, why you have this rave playing in the background? And why you keep going forward and back? Forward and back. Forward and back. And you put one foot forward. Why are you going forward and back? I want to go forward and back. Well, you need to play Final Fantasy XIV. The music in this game is absolutely incredible. I just ordered the vinyl set of all the music from the game. I don't know if it's all the music. It's a set. I think it includes most of the music, because of how much I love the music. The Shadowbringers music just recently went on Spotify. Go check it out. Go check it out. It is some of the best video game music you will ever hear. And I'm not kidding. It spans across multiple genres, from electronic to jazz to classical to I can't even, it's like crazy amounts of variety of just in-game music. And I'm not just talking about dungeon music. I'm talking about ambience. I'm thinking about Lahi. I'm thinking about all the different crazy, awesome zone musics that are out there. And I don't understand how one man could be so amazing at it. And that we're talking about Soken. This is the guy we mentioned earlier that was battling cancer in the hospital and composing music for the next patch. And the community really feels a connection with Soken because he provides such great music. And you know, I don't like every song that he does, but I like a vast majority of them. Even the ones I don't like, I can tolerate. The guy, man, he's the next generation of great composers. I mean, people think about some of the great Final Fantasy composers of the past, and some of the other composers of other Final Fantasy, not just Final Fantasy music, but other composers of other video games out there. Soken's going to be in that list. You better believe it. The guy makes absolutely amazing music, and that's one of the best things about Final Fantasy, that you may hear people talk about it, but I'm going to reiterate. The music is some of the best parts of the game, and it gives you that connection to the content, because when you hear the music of Innocence, the dungeon, you can see this fat dude walking down the stairs. Oh!
I am greatness. What are you doing?
Spoilers.
Ah.
You know, you can see it. You can actually relive the moments just hearing the music from the dungeon. And when you fight the Warrior of Light, you hear this music, man, and it's just like when you fight all these bosses, when you fight Thornton, the music is going to have a connection with the experience because that's how good it is. It's not just random music. It is connected to the content. The content is great. The music is great. And you got this potpourri of awesomeness that you can't really describe. Again, it made me resub to the game. That's how powerful it was. And that was 2.0 stuff, which arguably is really wasn't all that great compared to the stuff we got now. The 2.0 music was good, but man, some of the newer stuff is just incredible. And that was back then for me in 2.0 when I came back for that song. The music, you got to check it out. Like I said, it's on Spotify. If you got Spotify, just look up Final Fantasy XIV. You're going to have access to all the music. You can just listen to it and see what I'm talking about. The music is some of the best parts of this game. All right. So we have saying the praises to Soken and Yoshi P and all the awesome people, all the developers. We have we have praised the community, the developers, the demo, your time being respected, the story being relevant, job class freedom, how good the crafting is, how good the music is. Well, now it's time to talk about the bad. Gather around, children. We're going to talk about the bad a little bit. Sit down. First up the bat, and I think a lot of you WoW players are going to know what I'm going to say. We're going to talk about this little thing called Mogstation. That's right. That beast of a monster that you have to compel yourself to deal with when you create your account and try to play and buy the game. You have to go to the Square Enix store. You have to provide a certain login ID there. Then you have to go to the Mogstation and provide a certain set of credentials, maybe once or twice. And then you have to go through this convoluted system to tie the two together. And you fail. And then you accidentally buy the game again. So you have 5 copies of the game because the systems are so bad. You're like, what? What's going on? I've got all these extra copies of the game and I still can't play. Why? Why? Because Mogstation is awful. Listen, even if you're trying to buy optional stuff, not just trying to buy the game initially. If I just want to go buy a mount, and I recently did this with the Alexander mount. If I gotta go buy a mount, I have to log in like 3 times. So I go in, I click buy, I go to optional items, I log in. Well, I have to log in to get to that. And then I log in and I go, and then it asks me to log into the store or something to do payment. And then I come back to Mogstation, I have to log in again, and I apply the code, and I might have to log in again depending on, and it's just like, what is going on? And if you have to buy an expansion, oh, be prepared. Or if you're on Steam, oh, be prepared. If you're on Steam, guess what? Guess what? You can't buy anything else in any other place except Steam. That's right. So if you see Shadowbringers on sale on Square's site for $25, you're like, wow, that's pretty good price. I better go buy it. Whoops, I have the Steam version. I can only use things on Steam. Well, why? Why? Because it's 2 different systems. They treat it like a console, man. It's on PC, but it's not. It is, but it's not. It's on PC, but it's not on PC. It is terrible. Arguably, like somebody asked me, they were like, Buana, what's the worst part of the game? They was like talking about one thing or Mogstation. I'm like, listen, dude, they're going neck and neck. Anytime somebody new comes to the game and I recommend the game, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I really, really hope they beat Mogstation Savage. Because if you don't get past that boss, you just won't play. I really hope they fix it because it is the top of my list. Whenever somebody says, Buana, what is the worst thing about Final Fantasy? The very top, the first thing that pops in my head is Mogstation. That's the very first thing. That's why I talked about it first, because it is awful. And if you're going to continue to play the game, you're going to have to deal with it. Even if you already bought the game or if you're going to plan on buying expansions and or mounts or optional items, you have to deal with Mogstation. If you need to manage your subscription, if you need to re-up your subscription, if you need to reapply a time code, you have to deal with Mogstation. It is so bad. And I'm not exaggerating. I know some of you are typing right now, oh, Buana, come on, it's not. It is that bad. It is that bad. And I'm an 11 player coming from Play Online. And I remember how bad that was. Oh, the dark days of Play Online. I remember those days. And Mogstation is giving it a run for its money. I don't know what it is about Square, man, and account management, but they just don't know how to do it. They just don't know how to do it. I don't know what it is. They don't know how to do it. So yeah, Mogstation, the worst. The next thing I want to talk about is the second thing on the list that I think about when somebody says, hey, Buana, what is the worst thing about the game? I'm like, yeah, Mogstation, but then there's this other thing called housing. Housing savage. Tell you a little something about housing. Housing's getting a bad rep because housing is a result of people who cheat. It's a result of people who are automating buying a house. They have tools, they have scripts, and they automate buying a house. And for a long time in Final Fantasy XIV, it was near impossible to buy a house because people would snipe them. The property would become available. They would use some kind of third-party tool to bypass the game and snipe the property. And if you played other games with housing, you know what I'm talking about. The Band-Aid that's been applied to the game is this. And when I explain this, keep in mind I am not exaggerating. I recently went through this on stream last week. I'm not exaggerating. I may mess up a little bit of details, but you'll get the gist of it. A property becomes available, right? It gets an appraisal price. It gets a price. And it shows up on a placard. You have to physically go over to the placard. You click on it, and you try to buy the house. But then it tells you, oh, house is not available for sale yet.
Oh, housing savage.
So what you have to do is you have to keep trying to buy the house for an undisclosed amount of time and hope that you land it. So it's going to be a random point in time where the house will magically become available that nobody knows. Yoshi P doesn't even know. He's like, Final Fantasy IV, I don't know. They don't even know. And you just have to keep trying over
Housing
and over and over and over again for hours. You're sitting there clicking buy. It's like 5 dialogues. Buy. People sitting there coming up with systems where they're hitting buttons on their controllers, where they're lining up the dialogues and clicking the mouse button, walking away with a wireless mouse, clicking the wireless mouse, trying to figure out a way to make it easier to buy a house. It's easier to buy a house in real life than it is in Final Fantasy XIV. Even if you're broke, you could be broke as a joke in real life, and it'll be easier to buy a house in real life than it will be in Final Fantasy XIV. It's that bad, man. It's really bad. And like I said, it gets a bad rep because this was a Band-Aid applied to address automated bots and automated tools from sniping houses. But the experience that it left behind is one of the worst things you will ever encounter in any video game ever made. It is so awful. And once you see somebody with a house, all the cool stuff, all the furniture, all the cool features and stuff, you're like, I want a house. And you have enough money to buy a house. But guess what? You ain't getting one. You're not getting a house. No. Not unless you go through Housing Savage solo. Minimum eye level. No echo. It is awful. It is so bad. It is atrocious. And systems are coming. There's supposed to be a lottery coming. There's supposed to be some other things they're going to try to do. They're coming out with their Animal Crossing-like thing that's supposed to help address some of this stuff. But as it stands right now, this is running neck and neck with Mogstation as some of the worst parts of the game. When you see what people have to do to buy a house, you're like, I can't believe you're doing this in 2021. I can't believe this is something that's happening today in 2021. I'm not exaggerating. It is that bad. And I have done it for 8 hours at a time. I did it again for 12 hours at a time. And both times when I finished, I said, I'm not going to do it again. I hope I keep my promise to myself this time. I'm not doing it again. It is so bad. So if you're considering a house, make sure that you hate yourself. The next thing I want to talk about, which arguably I can talk about for days, and it encompasses a lot, is what I like to call the Crystal Tools funk. If you don't know, Crystal Tools was an engine or like a architecture design for Final Fantasy XIII, all the lightning stuff, right? And this is something that they kind of brought over for Final Fantasy XIV 1.0. If you watch the documentaries and the rise and fall of Final Fantasy, you learn a lot about how Crystal Tools was brought in and how a lot of the game was built on Crystal Tools and how it was used company-wide by Square Enix, how they pride themselves on using it and they were just using it in everything. So I call it the Crystal Tools funk because Final Fantasy 2.0, Final Fantasy XIV 2.0, inherited a lot of the bad stuff from 1.0, i.e. Crystal Tools. And it produces a lot of the annoying things about the game. When you got somebody from World of Warcraft coming over to play, they're probably going to be complaining about something that has to do with the engine and Crystal Tools. Number one, snapshotting and netcode. That's not a good thing, by the way. This whole idea of you looking at an indicator and it doesn't go off until the indicator disappears instead of where you at. That's not a good thing. That's something we've learned to live with, something we've kind of conditioned our brain to do with Final Fantasy XIV, but that's not a good thing. It actually should be when the ability goes off and where you are, they should be aligned. Nah, the netcode is awful. It used to be worse. Any 2.0 players in the house? It used to be worse than what it is now. They improved it. It used to be really bad to where you would step out and you'd be like, all right, I'm chilling. Yeah, let me do my next ability. And then you get hit. You'd be like, what? What hit me? It'd be so comical, man. Like you'd be doing a fight. Something would go to hit you. You'd be way on the other side of the arena and you'd be doing your next 2 combos and then you all of a sudden get hit with something. You're just like, what is going on? Now the snapshotting idea, when I talk about snapshotting again, it's an indicator that we've conditioned ourselves that when there's a big red circle on the ground, you need to move out of that circle before the circle disappears. That's called a snapshot. So when the circle disappears, that's when the hit is going to register. If you're inside the circle, when it disappears, the server will recognize that as a hit. You have to be outside the snapshot. That's how you do with slide casting and all the different other wacky stuff that's part of this Crystal Tools funk. So when someone comes from another MMO or another game where that kind of wackiness doesn't exist, it's an adjustment. And they have every right in the world to call it awful, because it is. It's terrible. It's something you get, like I said, it's something you get used to, but it's just one component of that Crystal Tools engine funk that we inherited. Because if you remember from the Crystal Tools stuff in 1.0, everything was server side. So dialogues that came up client side, that was a server side script running. That's what created all the lag. With all the dialogues, you click OK, and then it had to run a server-side script to go to the next dialogue. We've got remnants of that stuff in 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0. Crystal Tools funk. As a result of Crystal Tools funk, the glamour log will never happen. What's a glamour log, one? You know the glamour dresser that we have? People are like, man, why can't they just do like WoW? Why can't they just have like a transmog log or like they have in WoW where you just, you could bring it up in it? That's what we call the glamour log. That's actually what the developers called it. They tried to build it in Final Fantasy XIV. A lot of people don't know this. They actually tried to build it in Final Fantasy XIV, but they couldn't. You know why? Because they ran out of space. They ran out of memory. They ran out of crap in Crystal Tools. So as a result of using this crappy engine, we can never have glamour log. We've got to deal with the nonsense that we have today. It really, really stinks. And you know what else is a result of this? The inventory. You notice that they're getting rid of the belts to make room for rings and Endwalker. They're getting rid of an item. They're getting rid of belts so that they can have memory to make room for more rings in your armor log. Crystal Tools funk. It's stupid. It really is dumb that this engine has these kinds of limitations. And I feel bad for Yoshi P and the devs because, like I said, we love them. But they have to deal with this crappy crap. As a result, we've got this weird armor chest that nobody likes. And this whole system with inventory that nobody likes. We've got these inventory limitations that nobody likes. We've got retainers that we have to buy to get more inventory in a paid game because nobody likes it. Crystal Tools funk. And Final Fantasy XI, Final Fantasy XIV were supposed to be 2 games that had seamless zones. Like Final Fantasy XI did, like World of Warcraft has. Where there was like practically no loading screens, right? They were like supposed to be seamless zones. Can't do it because of Crystal Tools. Crystal Tools funk. That's why we got loading screens. That's why we got instance zones. That's why we can't do stuff in the open because the engine can't handle it. That's why you try to zone into a scale. It's like there's too many people here. There's so many little things that are annoying in the game that are limitations. People like to call it PlayStation stuff. I'm like, no, it's not PlayStation stuff. Don't even try it because that stuff existed before they didn't even think about consoles in 1.0. The consoles wasn't even on their radar, man. They claimed it was going to be for PS3, but that game was not built for PS3. They were going to optimize it down for PS3. They use a lot of resources with that crappy engine to make the things they made. And here we are. So we're inheriting a lot of bad stuff in Final Fantasy XIV. And I call it the Crystal Tools funk because, again, a lot of those ideas and a lot of that design came from the Final Fantasy XIII engine called Crystal Tools. You've got your wacky menu system. You've got all these settings. You got all this stuff that's happening. And admittedly, Yoshi P has done a great job of transforming that crappy engine into the game we got today, but we're still seeing stuff from it, right? So if they decide to make a Final Fantasy XVII or the next MMO, whatever they're going to call it, I'm hoping that they just ditch all of that stuff and start from zero. No Crystal Tools funk at all. Some people think 14 was that. No, it wasn't. There's a lot of inherited crap taken from 1.0. They kind of had to. They couldn't build it from scratch. They had to start from something, right? They only had 2 years. 2 years? Something like that. So it's really, really bad with Crystal Tools, man. And I think if you talk about all the other bad things about the game, it'll come back to Crystal Tools. Well, save maybe like story pacing and stuff like that and some of the early stuff, you know, which was rushed. So Final Fantasy XIV is not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination. There's a lot of problems with it. But the things that I named, namely the community and the developers, make it so we can tolerate it, that we can get used to it. Because even though the game has bad parts of it, those good traits of it make it worth playing. And the fact that your time is respected, the story is relevant, you got something to listen to. You've got all this freedom to do whatever you want. The music's so good, the crafting's so good, that it's easy to say, all right, I can deal with snapshotting. All right, if I got to buy a mount, sure, I'll go through the worst system ever created by mankind. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. I'll just never buy a house. I'm good with that. I'll just ignore that house. I'll just forget that housing exists. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll just forget that housing exists. Yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah, the Crystal Tool stuff, I'll just do workarounds. Yeah, I'm good with that. So it's a compromise. It's definitely a compromise that we have to deal with any video game. But overall, I think we're getting the better end of the deal. We're definitely getting the better end of the deal. So thank you, Yoshi P. Thank you, developers of Final Fantasy XIV, for all the time you put into the game. We got nowhere to go but up. There's a lot of good things planned for Endwalker and beyond. Hopefully a lot of the things that I named that could be improved will be improved. Hopefully the things that I named that are good will continue to be good. And going back to the commenter, hopefully this is some decent original content instead of React videos. Don't worry, I'm going to keep doing React videos because you guys like it. There's people out there that like React videos. But, you know, I've been doing YouTube stuff since forever. Lots of original content. I'm no stranger to it. And I understand that people want to see it. So here we are. Take care of yourselves. Thanks for watching. If you agree, disagree, let me know in the comments. Join my Patreon, patreon.com/Buona if you want to help me out. Come on my live stream at twitch.tv/Buona. You guys are the best. Leave a comment, leave a like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you later. Take care of yourselves. And you're never going to buy a house.